If you were to predict which video games would receive sequels, Prehistoric Isle wouldn't be your first choice. Prehistoric Isle 1 was Cretaceous carnage that threw land of the lost and R-Type into a blender, brewing a classic shmup. Well designed, well respected. Despite its commercial success, SNK were content to move on, dismissing sequels in favor of exploring new ideas for greater variety. It remained a one-and-done deal, until smaller company Yumekobo got SNK's approval to develop a sequel 10 years after its release. Bringing us Prehistoric Isle 2, the most unlikely sequel in a million years. When a dormant franchise comes back from the dead after a decade, it's reasonable to expect it would evolve. 10 years is plenty of time for innovation to rethink the way any kind of game is designed. Playing it safe and not changing much is an option, sometimes a good one, but that risks a series feeling like a fossil if it falls too far behind the times. SNK and Yumekobo opted to bring the dinos up to date, utilizing some of the advancements made in shoot-'em-up design to moderate success. Don't worry too much though. Prehistoric Isle 2 is fun first and foremost, easily overshadowing its rougher patches. Rather than storming the Godzilla-esque monster island of the first game, Prehistoric Isle 2 takes a few cues from Jurassic Park 2, letting the dinos loose across the United States to wreak some havoc in environments inspired by its landmarks, like Manhattan or the Grand Canyon. Like a diorama meant to be destroyed by Megazord, these locations are your playground for dino demolition, with a good chunk of destructible objects for good measure, setting a strong foundation to heighten the gameplay. As for everything else, it's best to break it down from top to bottom, going from most to least important. Since it's the second most important factor behind fun, I'm pleased to declare Yumekobo understood why smaller hitboxes are best, even outside bullet hell. It unlocks the potential of flashier patterns, but it also helps games feel more fulfilling. Compared to yesteryear, the probability of enemy fire being undodgeable is 0 to none. That's as modern and timeless as you can get. As a result of this, or out of compulsion to make the sequel more distinct, the prequel's portable drone was discarded in favor of emergency bombs that grant invulnerability for 3 seconds when you use one, boiling down the gameplay to dodge and shoot with a few extra steps. Prehistoric Isle 2 goes all in on simplicity. Basic isn't inherently bad, but we need to talk about those extra steps. That's where the problems arise. While casuals were the primary demographic, attempts were made to appease the hardcore crowd with light scoring and strategy. However, it seems like Yumekobo struggled to distinguish ideas that add real value versus meaningless fluff. Your weapon selection's the best example of this duality. You're given the choice between a faster or slower helicopter.
That's good.
It caters to you whether you prefer precision or mobility. Then, after you take off, you see these red and blue weapon pickups. You'd think you get a new bullet spread like every other game, but both guns are exactly the same.
That's bad.
Blue is the crappy straight shot, red is the good straight shot. Your sidearms fare slightly better because there's a notable difference in power between the larger standard missiles and the smaller homing option. That's proper variety. The blue primary gun should not exist. It's fat that can be trimmed for less convolution. If your game is going to be designed around one mechanic, there's no need to forcefully overcomplicate it. Just ditch the extra step and more people will find your game cool because their weapon feels better. It's as simple as that. Speaking of questionable shmup gameplay, Why on earth would you not have Autofire in 1998? At this point, it would have been 6 years since Truxton 2 proved the joy of shmups isn't pounding a button. The exclusion of Autofire is a bizarre regression, especially for people with carpal tunnel. Autofire broadens your audience for free, leaving you more time to polish everything else. It should have been common sense by that point. Last, and in all honesty, least potent problem, the graphics. Yumekobo took a few notes from Nintendo and decided to blend sprites in with computer-generated graphics. Most of the time, it looks fine, if a little dated. But what is up with the Stage 3 background? The rest of the game scrolls at a smooth 60 frames per second. Why is this grainy GeoCities GIF chopping at less than half that? It looks like shit! Onlookers in the arcade, with plenty of options, would not be impressed if someone was playing this level. I may sound like I'm ripping this game to shreds over minor problems, but it's not because the game is bad. On the contrary, everything else about Prehistoric Isle 2 is great, to the point where the flaws jut out more than average since it has A+ potential. You really can't go wrong making a full-blown military versus dinosaurs war. You'd have to be very incompetent to screw up one of the prominent childhood fantasies. I just want to see that cognition come alive in the best way possible. That's all that really needs to be said about the game, but I might as well highlight two noteworthy features for completeness. Starting with the scoring system, since it's crucial for a highly replayable shmup. While it isn't too deep, the main risk versus reward mechanic of choosing whether to drop off your civilians for power or not gets the job done at encouraging repeat playthroughs. Layered on top of the basic point stars and bonus multipliers you get for getting maximum power guns. The last thing that needs to be addressed is the game's difficulty. It's surprisingly easier than your average arcade game. Of course, the nasty curving bullets on the last stage ensure the game isn't a pushover. But since you can trade millions of points for extra bombs, it's feasible to bypass most of the hardest parts. If you or your arcade operator crank the difficulty up, it'll be closer to the original. But on default settings, Prehistoric Isle 2 is a good beginner shmup without being boring. With all its flaws weighing down the spine, of this game, I hereby award Prehistoric Isle 2 a flat B. It's a solid shoot 'em up and a good sequel to one of the pristine monster games of yesteryear, but it won't set your gaming world on fire.